There's a moment, and you may already feel it, not like a loud bang, but more like a subtle shift, like the air in a room suddenly changing, like silence pressing into your chest. It's the beginning of something ancient. And you can't always point to when it started, but you know it has. Maybe it was a dream you couldn't forget. Maybe it was the way your reflection started to feel like a stranger. Or maybe it was the day you realized nothing in the world held the same meaning anymore. If this sounds familiar, then listen carefully, because you're standing at the edge of dark ascension. And no, that's not a warning. That's a summoning. Most people think of ascension as light, peace, transcendence. But those who are truly awakening know the truth. Before the light comes, the shadow must rise. Before you ascend, you must descend. You must walk into the depths of yourself and face what you've buried, denied, and feared. This is not weakness. This is the sacred process of becoming whole. And if you're here, if you're drawn to this message, then you're not just dabbling in spirituality. You're not just looking for a lifestyle. You're being initiated. You are being called into the void, not to be consumed, but to be reborn. And that's the first powerful sign. Your life is unraveling, and you know it's necessary. You see, the descent begins subtly. Things fall apart. Relationships that once felt safe begin to feel suffocating. Your job, your passions, your routines, they lose their color. You wake up with a weight on your chest, a question in your bones. What is this all for? And while the world sees you functioning, smiling, posting, inside, you're crumbling. This is not depression. This is disintegration. The false layers of self are peeling off. Your soul is demanding truth, and truth is always disruptive. The second sign is that everything familiar begins to feel foreign. You feel like a ghost moving through your own life. And while it's terrifying, it's also strangely relieving, because deep down, you're tired of pretending. Tired of playing roles. Tired of being who the world told you to be. The dark night isn't just about pain, it's about stripping away everything that's not real. The third sign is that you begin to experience synchronicities that feel almost unsettling. You'll think of someone, and they'll text you. You'll dream of an ancient symbol, and then see it on a stranger's tattoo. You'll overhear conversations that answer questions you've never spoken aloud. The veil between dimensions thins. You're no longer just living in this world, you're piercing through it. And the universe responds not to who you pretend to be, but to who you are becoming. These signs, these moments are not random. They are echoes of your higher self reaching through time, through density, saying, "You're close, keep going." And then comes the fourth sign, perhaps the most difficult. You begin to feel like you are losing your mind, and in a way you are, because the mind you're losing wasn't yours to begin with. It was programmed, conditioned, trained to obey systems that are now collapsing inside you. You question everything: your identity, your beliefs, even your spiritual path. And this questioning, it's sacred. It's the fire that burns the illusion. The ego will panic. It will try to cling to old narratives. But your soul, it will stay quiet, observing, waiting. Because it knows that right on the other side of that breakdown is a breakthrough. That the mind must fracture before the heart expands. The fifth sign is that darkness no longer scares you, it calls to you. Not in a destructive way, but in a deeply honest one. You're not drawn to surface positivity anymore. You crave depth. You begin to see through the masks of people. You sense their wounds, their lies, their longing. You hear the words they don't say, and instead of judging them, you feel compassion. Because you recognize it. You've seen that darkness in yourself. You've sat with it, and instead of running, you made space for it. That is the essence of dark ascension, becoming spacious enough to hold both light and shadow without rejecting either. That is real power. That is real evolution. The sixth sign is that time itself begins to shift. You'll have days that feel like lifetimes and lifetimes that pass in hours. You'll begin to feel like you're walking between worlds. One foot in this world, one in something far older. You'll start to sense that you've done this before. That you've died many times, not physically but spiritually. that in some other version of reality you've already walked this path. And you'll feel a strange mix of déjà vu and destiny, like you're simply remembering what you came here to do. This timeline, this version of you is just the latest layer. And that realization, it humbles you, it expands you, it activates you. And the final, seventh sign, perhaps the most undeniable, is that you no longer seek to escape. Not even from pain, not even from death. You sit with what is. You begin to understand that the purpose of life isn't to ascend out of your humanity, it's to descend into it. To embody the divine not by rising above, but by going deeper within. Dark ascension is not a detour from the light. It is the path to it. It's the understanding that your wounds are not obstacles, they are gateways. That your fears are not to be denied, they are to be transmuted. And in that moment when you stop resisting, when you surrender not out of weakness, but out of radical trust, you step into your true power. You become the storm and the stillness. You become the fire and the ash. You become the bridge between realms. So I ask you, with no answer expected, only contemplation invited, what part of yourself have you been avoiding? What truth have you buried so deep that it's now rising in your dreams, in your triggers, in your silence? And what would happen not if you fixed it, but if you simply faced it? Because if you've made it this far, I promise you this isn't the end. It's the edge. And what lies beyond it is not destruction, but transfiguration.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
There comes a point in the journey after the initial unraveling, after the silence starts to echo with meaning, where you begin to see yourself in the most unexpected places. Not in the light, not in the peace, not in the love, but in the darkness of others. Their rage, their fear, their manipulation, their grief, it all begins to feel strangely familiar. Almost like watching a distorted version of yourself through a cracked mirror. And it's not because you've become more cynical or judgmental, quite the opposite. It's because your awareness has deepened, your vision has sharpened. You're no longer hypnotized by surface behavior. You're seeing the soul beneath the performance. And what you see is you. This is the shadow mirror. And when you reach this stage, you are no longer just healing, you are integrating. You begin to realize that the people who trigger you the most are not enemies or obstacles. They are reflections. They are fragments of your own unconscious energy, projected outward so you can finally face them. Someone lies to you and you feel fury, but beneath that is a deeper truth. You're confronting the part of you that lied to yourself for years. Someone manipulates you, and it feels violating, but it also awakens the part of you that gave away your power just to be loved. Someone walks away without explanation and the abandonment burns, but it also shows you where you've been abandoning your own needs, your own truth, your own inner child. And it's not about blame, it's about recognition. Because when you recognize the darkness outside as a mirror of the darkness within, you reclaim your power from it. This is one of the most sacred and most painful phases of dark ascension. You stop separating the good you from the bad them. You stop pretending that love only exists in light. You stop chasing validation and start seeking wholeness. And wholeness requires you to welcome every fragmented part of your being, not just the spiritual, not just the wise, but the jealous, the bitter, the broken, the raging. And when you do, something unexpected happens. You begin to soften, not in weakness, but in truth. You stop needing to be right all the time. You stop defending your ego. You start listening not just to others, but to the forgotten voices inside you that have been screaming for your attention through every trigger, every heartbreak, every betrayal. You begin to see that forgiveness is not about excusing the harm others caused. It's about releasing yourself from the energetic prison their actions built within you. And even deeper than that, it's about forgiving the version of you who allowed it. The version of you who didn't know better, who was surviving, who was doing the best they could with the tools they had. This level of inner work is not glamorous. It doesn't come with applause or social media quotes. It's messy. It's raw. It happens in the quiet moments when no one is watching. But it's also where your true ascension begins, not by escaping the shadow, but by dancing with it, by learning its language, by hearing what it's been trying to tell you all along. You are more powerful than you've ever believed, but you were too afraid to face what that power required of you. Because real power doesn't always look like light. Sometimes it looks like setting boundaries so fierce they burn bridges. Sometimes it looks like walking away from everything you once begged to stay. Sometimes it looks like sitting in your own darkness without distraction, without blame, and simply saying, "I see you. You're part of me. And I'm not afraid anymore." That's the moment the mirror stops distorting. That's when you stop seeing enemies and start seeing teachers. That's when you stop just healing and start alchemizing. So now I ask you something most people run from. Who are you when no one is looking? What truths do you hide beneath your kindness, your success, your spiritual quotes? What parts of yourself are you still trying to exile because you've been taught they make you unworthy? Can you sit with those parts not to fix them, but to understand them? Because here's the secret. The darkness in others is only unbearable when you haven't made peace with your own. But once you do, the world becomes less threatening. You become less reactive. You stop absorbing other people's chaos and start transmuting it. You become a presence that doesn't flinch in the face of pain. You become a mirror not distorted, not cracked, but clear, reflective, still. And in that stillness, others begin to see themselves too. That's how the ripple begins. Not with preaching, not with performance, but with presence. There is a moment on the path of dark ascension that does not come with warning. It doesn't arrive with ceremony or cosmic fanfare. It slips in silently, almost cruelly, disguised as failure, loss, confusion, and despair. This is the Ascension Collapse, the moment when everything you thought you were begins to disintegrate. And I won't lie to you, it's terrifying. It feels like death, and in many ways it is. But not the kind of death that ends you. The kind that frees you. The kind that rips away everything built on illusion so that something true can finally take root. The collapse is sacred. It is not the end of your journey. It is the demolition before the divine rebuild. You'll know you're entering this phase when nothing fits anymore. Your job, your relationships, your ambitions, your identity, they begin to feel like clothes that once kept you warm but now suffocate your skin. You might try to hold on, to salvage what's familiar. You'll tell yourself you're just tired, just going through a phase. You'll try to force old dreams to feel meaningful again. But they won't, because something inside you has shifted, something irreversible. You've tasted truth, and now you can't unsee it, and the life you built before that truth. It can no longer contain you. At first it will look like everything is falling apart, and it is. But not because you've failed, because you've outgrown. This is the collapse of stories you no longer believe, of roles you no longer need to play, of masks that once protected you, but now only block your breath. And yes, it hurts. It's supposed to. You're not just losing things, you're losing versions of yourself, versions that kept you safe, versions that helped you survive. But survival was never the point. Liberation is. And liberation requires loss, radical, honest, soul-level loss. You may lose friends, partners, even family. You may feel abandoned, misunderstood, mocked. But the truth is, they're not rejecting you. They're responding to the energy you no longer carry. You're vibrating out of alignment with your old frequency, and that means people who resonated with your wounds may no longer recognize your healing. Let them go, not with resentment, but with reverence. Because if they were meant to walk with you in your next evolution, they would feel the call too. And if they don't, that's a sign not of their weakness, but of your readiness. And what do you do in the collapse? You stop resisting. You grieve. You lay down the armor. You stop trying to save the burning house and let it fall. You sit in the rubble and ask, what's real now? And in that question, something magical begins to happen. You begin to hear a voice, not loud, not external, Boutancy was the voice of your soul rising from beneath the ruins, whispering, "Now we begin." This is where the unimaginable starts to form, not because you planned it, but because you finally made space for it. The collapse clears the field. It strips you of attachments that were rooted in fear. And when fear dies, creation begins. New ideas, new desires, new connections begin to appear, not from effort, but from alignment. You stop chasing, and instead, you start attracting experiences that match your true frequency. You become magnetic not because you're performing, but because you're real. And in this raw, deconstructed state, you realize something profound. You were never meant to be who you were pretending to be. So I ask you now, in this fragile and powerful moment, what if the life you're mourning was never yours to begin with? What if it was a narrative given to you by people who didn't know your soul? And what if everything that's crumbling is actually clearing the path for the life your soul has been trying to lead you to all along? The Ascension Collapse is not the tragedy. It's the blessing disguised in chaos. It's the divine intervention you didn't know you were praying for. And when you stop seeing it as destruction and start seeing it as sacred realignment, you stop fearing what's leaving and start opening to what's arriving. Because the unimaginable, the life you couldn't even dream of, because you were too busy surviving, is waiting. It's not in the future, it's in the now. And it begins the moment you stop clinging to the ashes and start breathing into the unknown. If you've made it through the collapse, then you're no longer the same person who began this journey. Something ancient has awakened in you. Something that doesn't need external approval, doesn't chase comfort, doesn't seek to belong in broken systems. You've been emptied out, stripped raw, and in that sacred emptiness, something miraculous begins. Rebirth, but not the kind we usually imagine, not a return to who you were, not a polished reinvention. This is deeper. This is the emergence of a version of you that has never walked this earth before. You become a living frequency, a pulse of truth, a bridge between the invisible and the tangible, a portal. This is the moment when you stop doing spirituality and start embodying it. You no longer need to talk about ascension, you are it. You don't need to prove your worth, you remember it. Your presence starts to shift rooms without speaking. Your silence begins to teach louder than any book. And it's not because you have all the answers. It's because you've made peace with not needing them. You've learned to live from the inside out, not the outside in. And that shift makes you a transmitter of truth, a generator of coherence in a world addicted to chaos. You begin to notice something subtle yet powerful. People are drawn to you, not for your charisma, but for your clarity. They sense something steady in you, something unshakable, even if they can't explain it. It's the frequency of someone who's walked through their own fire and didn't run from the burning. You've become the proof that it's possible to go through the dark and come out not just whole but holy. And this isn't about superiority, it's about service. Real spiritual power doesn't seek to dominate, it seeks to anchor, to hold, to stabilize the grid of awakening for others who are still finding their way. But this new frequency comes with responsibility. You must live in alignment, not just when it's convenient, but when it's difficult. Your intuition becomes your compass, and if you ignore it now, the consequences are immediate. Not as punishment, but as clarity. You're too awake to lie to yourself anymore, too sensitive to pretend. Every misalignment feels like static in your soul. Every compromise echoes like thunder. You can't go back to sleep, not because you're not allowed to, but because you can't fit into that skin anymore. You've outgrown the dream and now you're living in truth. At this level, reality itself begins to respond to you differently. Time bends. Manifestations accelerate. You speak, and life echoes back with precision. Not because you're lucky, but because you're clear. Your field is aligned with your essence, and that alignment unlocks doors that effort never could. You're not forcing outcomes, you're entering the quantum flow where outcomes recognize you. You become a collaborator with the divine, not a beggar at its feet. And yet, even as all of this unfolds, you remain grounded. You do the dishes, you pay the bills, you hug your friends. Because ascension isn't about escaping the human experience, it's about sanctifying it. You realize the true miracle isn't floating above the world, but walking through it fully awake, fully present, fully here. You are the integration of heaven and earth, the point where the infinite meets the intimate. That is the rebirth frequency. Quiet, potent, irrevocable. So I leave you with a question not to answer, but to live. What happens when you stop waiting to be saved and start living like the portal you were born to be? What shifts in the world around you when your very existence becomes the medicine, the message, and the miracle? You are no longer becoming. You